Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to Financing Youth and Feminist Futures from Tokenism to True Investment. We're going to have a 1.5 hour side event for you, and we're going to feature some amazing lived experiences, an expert panel discussion with our fantastic panelists, and just I'm not going to spend too long on this opening. But just to let you know, we are recording the session. So if you say anything or ask any questions that you don't want us to share, just let us know. I'll send my email into the chat. And if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to type them in. We're going to be going through them at the end. Um, and without further ado, I'm going to pass over to the director of Yield Hub, Sonali Silva, who's going to deliver the opening remarks for us.
Thank you so much, Alex. Hi, everyone. I'm Sonali Silva. I'm the director of Yield Hub. And Yield Hub is an organization that we work on meaningful youth partnerships in sexual and reproductive health and rights. It feels like almost like a risk to say those words in unison, youth and sexual reproductive rights, when we're talking about financing and development. So it gives me all the more pleasure to open this space, a space that we've carved out, insisted on, and built together. We're here because across every region, in every movement, youth feminist activists are already doing this work. It is a matter of bringing it to the light in the context of FfD4. We're healing, building, resisting, and often without the luxury of rest in our lived realities. And we are often being referred to as the future, but I'm here to say that we are actually the ever brilliant present. And let's be honest, the systems that are meant to support us are still not showing up in the way that we are hoping them to. Financing is still referred to as a technical issue, but in our lived realities, it's not. It's a feminist issue, it's a youth issue. While feminist movements sustain communities on shoestring budgets, often less than 10,000 a year, $10,000 a year, that's breadcrumbs when we're talking about financing for development. While youth-led organizations and youth-serving movements are pushing an innovation at the edge of crisis, only 0.7% of bilateral aid reaches these movements. So this isn't a funding gap, it's actually a values gap. And it's one that we're hoping to address and bring to light in our session. The feminist and youth movements here today at FfD4, I think we would be remiss if we weren't setting the context, and I wasn't speaking about it in the opening remarks. Because across the halls and in the headlines, you're hearing the right words: equity, inclusion, partnership. But what's actually happening outside of the spotlight? What are we seeing? There's a shrinking civic space where youth and feminist organizations, especially from the global majority, we're being asked to bring stories, but not strategy. We're being asked to show up, but not necessarily speak up, to applaud, but not to question. And we must name this moment for what it is. It's a dangerous gap between rhetoric and resourcing. As a global hub rooted in meaningful youth partnership in sexual reproductive health and rights, Yield Hub is very proud to co-host this session with Femnet and our allies from the major group of children and youth. The feminist movement is not separate from the youth movement, and we exist in the civic space. So, in this solidarity, we've signed the feminist statement on the Sevilla Compromise, calling for greater accountability. This is led by the Young Feminist Caucus, and we also encourage others who are joining the call today to sign the statement and endorse the Feminist Forum political declaration by the Women's Major Group. This is in support of the CSO mechanism for FfD4, which is asking for greater transparency and accountability in this FfD4 process. Don't just include us, invest in us. And I'm very proud to share and to stand today beside all of the visionaries here on our speakers, on our expert panel, Esther, Effie, Natalia, and Alexander, across sectors, across generations, united in a shared belief that a world where youth and feminist movements are trusted, they're resourced, and leading is not just possible, it's already being built. You will hear powerful truths today. You will feel urgency. And more than anything, I hope you leave with a greater understanding that financing justice is not charity. It's about shifting power. It is about the courage, not just to fund programs that are palatable, but the people determined to change their lived realities. So let me end with this, and on a hopeful note, If youth and feminist movements are powerful enough to drive change without sufficient funding, imagine what we could do with it. Thank you so much, and I hope for a good session.
Thank you so much, Sonali. That was a lovely start. And just to reiterate to those who just joined, feel free to type any questions or thoughts you have in the chat. We're going to have a section for that at the end. And as I put in the chat, interpretation both in Spanish and in French are available. And we also have auto-generated captions for those who might need it. Without any more talk from me, I'm going to pass over to our amazing moderator, and that is Dina Chaerani.
Hello, hello, hello. Let me set up the camera first and then, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much as well, Alex. I really also appreciate the opening remarks from our director, Sonali. It was amazing stating that, at the end of the day, funding for like the feminists and also young people is not about the charity. And we're gonna deep dive a lot today. And again, I wanna open this discussion today and then amazing session from the Fourth International Conference on Financing for Development. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Dina Chaerani, and I'm joining you from Yield Hub. I work as a program associate there, and it's deep honor to be moderating this powerful space for me. One that brings together the truth-telling, the critical questioning, and collective imagination. So again, I want to set the notes today is that we are here today not to ask for permission, not to ask for permission for those people that also attending this big event today, but to make it plain that the future is feminist, it has to be youthful, and it must be funded as such. So at the Fourth International Conference on Financing for Development, or we call it FfD4, I hope people that has not been familiar with FfD4, you can go check on Yield Hub page where we also explain about FfD4 in the most youthful and easiest language ever. So you can go check there. And the world is talking about in here in Sevilla, the debt justice, the tax reform, the 4 trillion annual financing gap that threatens the SDGs. But here's what missing, that youth and feminist movements, especially those from the global south, are still underfunded, undervalued, and overburdened. So this session today is about moving from the symbolism to structural investment, because tokenism won't finance the future that we deserve. At the end of this session today, there will be also a joint call to action. It's co-created by Yield Hub and Femnet. This event is also co-organized by Yield Hub and Femnet to reveal telling the truth. For the instance, for example, there are over 80% of youth-led organizations reported receiving only short-term project-based grants, and less than 20% have access to flexible or core funding, which makes sustainable planning nearly impossible. So I want to bring you today with the 3 critical questions that you can put in mind before we also kick off like some expert panel today, and then also listening to the amazing lightning session from the young people. First, remember, how do we shift power and reimagine financing system to truly support youth and feminist movement? Second critical questions that we have to always put in mind is that what does real accountability look like? Not just from the grantees, but also from donors and institutions. Last but not least is how do we act with urgency, not charity, because the stakes are intergenerational and it's multilateralism. So now, before we dive into these bigger questions, we begin with powerful voice from the front lines, sharing what it really means to live the consequences of underfunding and what bold alternatives we must imagine. So let me introduce to our first speakers for the Live Experience Lightning Talks. There is like amazing sister of mine, Natalia de León. She is the Communications and Youth Coordinator at FP 2030 Latin American Caribbean Hub. Bring insights from Latin America and Caribbean, where young people are championing rights-based and community-rooted SRHR solutions. So without any further ado, I'll give you the floor, Natalia.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Dina. I just want to confirm everyone can hear me okay. I'm really excited to contribute to this conversation. Today, I will be discussing a bit about our partnership fund and sort of the limitations that we've encountered with financing here in Latin America and the Caribbean. I think in the first place, it is super important to highlight that in Latin America and the Caribbean, youth and feminist-led initiatives are often the first to be cut during budget reductions, especially those working on sexual and reproductive rights, gender justice, or in rural and indigenous communities. And so generally speaking, we spend a lot of time looking for funds, and this makes for a very a context where burnout is really high because the limited amount of funding creates competition and rivalry between organizations, and there's a lot of time that is spent seeking funds rather than implementing projects. So the lack of funding forces us to work reactively, and we respond to crises that we could have prevented with consistent resources. So often we rely on unpaid labor to sustain our actions, which reproduces the same inequalities we aim to transform. And I believe this is also one of the great limitations that we see all across the world and not just in Latin America and the Caribbean. Secondly, I think FP 2030 has an initiative called our Partnership Fund, which is why and how flexible funding is able to make a difference. So our Partnership Fund consisted of flexible micro grants to youth-led organizations in Latin America and the Caribbean, ranging from $7,000 to $10,000. And it sounds like a really small amount to some people. When we first launched the partnership fund, we received a lot of criticism from people in the ecosystem being like, what are people even gonna do with an amount of financing that is so small? And it's incredible the stuff we were actually able to achieve with this funding. Last year, we had more than 10 innovative projects all across the region, which I'm excited to share a bit about. And so these funds were important because they were accessible, non-restrictive, and they were quickly dispersed, which allowed young people to respond to urgent needs without waiting for months. So with this support, youth groups created community campaigns, translated material into indigenous languages, developed mobilization strategies, and reached territories that are usually excluded from national agendas. We had those 11 projects take place everywhere. We had them in Guatemala, Honduras, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and more, which also led to a lot of reach across the region. For example, in Argentina, we were able to work with a local organization and partner in creating a chatbot on WhatsApp relating to SRHR that granted scientific and accurate information that was also accessible, not only in Spanish, but also in Quechua, which is one of the indigenous languages found in southern Argentina. So this was really important in terms of access. And then in Honduras, for example, we were able to have a project alongside Go Joven Honduras, which was called Aventuras de los MAC, or Adventures with Contraceptives. And basically what it focused on was on being able to provide accurate information on contraceptive methods to Honduran youth, but being also able to give free contraception to Honduran youth. So this was really important because it also focused on having what we would say in Spanish, par tu par, un guía para par, which is basically saying that someone that is a youth is talking to another youth about their sexual and reproductive health, which we have found is a really approachable way to talk about SRHR when it comes to young people. And so these were only two of the amazing 11 projects. Another one that I think is really important to highlight is we had research done alongside the southern Brazil, which linked climate justice and sexual and reproductive justice, and was basically an analysis of how the floodings happening due to the climate crisis in southern Brazil became a barrier to health, which in turn became a barrier for people being able to access their sexual and reproductive rights. And so we had these 11 projects focused on a different variety of topics, but at the end of the day, it became really transformative. This fund prioritized care, and so it included our support from the FP 2030 team in terms of mental health, collective well-being, leadership development, and having this continuous support from FP 2030 because we were looking for not only results, but impact with dignity. And so what we really attempted to do was foster a community alongside these 11 organizations and being able to transform the region together. So this type of funding supports not just specific activities, but generally strengthens movements and builds long-term capacities, which is really important because here in Latin America and the Caribbean, we see that there's a lot of gaps when it comes to capacity, and that's something we need to keep strengthening continuously. At the end, when the fund was launched, there were many doubts, as I mentioned, in the ecosystem about the impact of the micro grants. However, 58,000 people were benefited directly, and this was predominantly youth, indigenous and Afro-descendant communities, sex workers, and other historically left behind communities in family planning. And so now we're in the second phase of the fund, continuing to support these projects and their implementation throughout 2025, which is of particular importance considering the socio-political context that we're in nowadays, where funding is really, really limited. And so we continue accompanying these organizations. I think it is important to highlight as I close this lightning talk off that youth and feminist work is not complementary. It is essential infrastructure for justice and equity. And so the demand for flexible long-term funding for structural costs allows us to define our priorities and to make impact, which is something that is at times really difficult for organizations in terms of having that sustainable funding. So when we're talking about financing for development, we must include youth and feminists in decision making, not just in consultations, because we want co-creation and not symbolic gestures or tokenism. And we call for accountability and power redistribution, that the commitments to participatory and equitable funding models are fulfilled. At the end of the day, I think to reduce what donors can do is continue to reduce barriers and simplify reporting, offer structural and multi-year support, create mechanisms that value well-being, storytelling, and learning, and actively redistribute power from the global north to the south and from institutions to community. At the end of the day, it's the peoples that are working on the ground that are creating the most impact at times, right? And we want to continue being able to grant people the ability to create transformative and innovative solutions within their territories. So thank you all for this time. I just wanted to provide a brief overview of their partnership fund here in Latin America and the Caribbean and what it looked like, and how even small grants can make a huge difference in terms of what the community benefits, what communities benefit and are able to be included in family planning and SRHR. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Natalia, for grounding us in lived realities and reminding us why this conversation actually must start from the front lines. And we are especially grateful for you to joining us at such early hour. I know it's like around 2:30 a.m. in the morning at your time, which is only reflects your deep commitment to this work, and definitely your voice and another young people from the Latin American Caribbean voice remind us that feminist and youth leadership is not only present, it's persistent even across times. And so thank you very much for your time. So everybody give round of applause for Natalia. And then now I would like to invite our expert panel. And it is my great pleasure to first welcome someone who has long championed the rights of women, girls, and youth, not just in words, but through bold political actions. There will be Alexander De Croo. Mr. Alexander De Croo is the former Prime Minister of Belgium that has been an outspoken advocate for sexual and reproductive health and rights and has consistently backed feminist movements on the global stage. We are deeply grateful for your presence here today, especially amidst your busy schedule here in the scorching Sevilla. I think it's going to be 42 degrees again today. So thank you for standing with us in this crucial conversation, even if it's online and we cannot provide as well the stage today. So thank you very much, Mr. Alexander De Croo. The floor is yours, and I have a couple of questions for you if you are ready for the questions from the feminists. And
First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here, and it's really inspiring to listen to all of you on a topic which indeed is really close to my heart, always has been and always will be. So yeah, please go ahead, shoot your questions. I'd love to answer.
Yes, thank you so much. So I know that I have tons of questions, also young people, because we already opened a couple of questions on the Instagram as well. But maybe first thing first, as a setting the ground, we want to know, what do you think, like what policy shift must financing for development deliver to ensure the sustainable and inclusive financing for youth and feminist movements? Because we know the reality happening today in here it's very limited in the document itself, talking about youth and also feminist movement. So.
Well, I think one of the issues that you see is that a disproportionate amount of financing is going to large organizations. And those large organizations actually are quite far away from what is happening on the ground. And by definition, if you want to empower youth, if you want to work on feminism, this is something that you need to do with local organizations who have a good network, who have a good understanding of the local setting. And the local setting is very different from country to country, and even within countries, it's very different. That means that in organizing that, it needs to be inclusive by default, and you really need to make sure that from the start, it's participatory. From the start, youth and feminist movement are involved in the decision-making, and that it is not just someone who's used as an implementer, but organizations are being used in designing and defining the priorities. To make that happen, because you could say, well, why is that not happening today? Well, we see that very often in the financing calls, in the project calls, the eligibility, the criteria are actually quite harsh and quite difficult. And it's difficult because of the criteria that are set. And very often also, the administrative process is such a heavy one. Very often grassroots organization will just step out and not start in it because they see that it is too complicated. And the case is there. I mean, we see that investments that are being made in SRHR or in contraception or in family planning, I mean, the payout is huge on the societal level. And it is, for me, the best example where you say, look, this is not generosity. It's not charity. It's justice. I mean, it's making sure that people have access to the services that they need. And it's making sure that you include the youth voice in that debate. A debate which, unfortunately, throughout the world is being influenced more and more by conservatism. I think we should engage. So you could pinpoint and you could say, well, some of the debate is going in the wrong direction, or is opposed to the view that access to sexual rights is important. Well, I think we should engage with people who have different ideas. I think we should debate it. I think we should not demonize it. We should talk, understand, give examples, listen to some of the objections that people have. And come with arguments why we think that this is justice and why we think this is really sound investment.
I really love, I mean, you are very like bold, and then it's very feminist. I think we need more global leaders like you as well. And then like you mentioned about, it's not charity, listen more to the young people, because at the end of the day, they know more like the work on the ground, right? But then the reality as well, you know, not a lot of global leaders are willing to not even invite us, or like just open the ears and then listening to us. So because I know your background as well, you've been working a lot with also donors and so on and so forth. So probably what would be, or like what would it take, you know, for donors or government, because you are also prime ministers and you know how hard it is, for example, for like the system to change, to embed the core funding itself into their DNA, because especially during these budget constraints, and then there are a lot of budget cut all over the world, and then every country also has different priorities, but then also how to ensure that this discussion around meaningful youth participation, financing for youth, and also as RHR still gonna be in every single, okay, it's hard, maybe it's like every single country, but in their own DNA, so that it's not sidelined, because I feel like this is still sidelined up until now, even during the Sevilla conference.
Well, this domain, if we look at it in practice over the last years, has been projectized to the maximum. I mean, this is typically something which is financed on a project basis, and it is financed as nice to haves that you put on top. It's like the cherry on the cake. Well, of course, if you see that at some point the cake is getting smaller, I mean, there's less cherries to be put on the cake. And what we really need to work on is find ways to get it into core funding. I mean, core funding really is the way how you make sure that the funding is stable, and the funding is also stable on the content side of what is being done. And so all those projects, of course, are useful, but we all know that the project financing leads to stop and go. And the worst that you could have towards a young population or towards a feminist cause is this kind of stop and go. I mean, for 1 year there is financing and stuff happens, and then a year after nothing happens. I mean, towards a young population, if you have 1 year you have something, the year after you don't, it's like the first project never happened. I mean, having that stability is a crucial one. Now, the core funding discussion is one which is much broader than only SRHR and the topic we talk about. I mean, is in any of the development world today, there's really an issue of core funding. Now, what we see is that you see some private funds who start giving that certainty. We've seen the announcement of the Gates Foundation, which is really unique. I mean, this is providing in a time span of 20 years a continuous flow of investment, mostly in healthcare, of course, but often close to the topics that we talk about. Besides that, of course, this is a domain where the call that we did 10 years ago in Addis Ababa about private financing, a lot of that call actually has remained unanswered. But in this domain, the answers have been there. I mean, providing young people to opportunity. I mean, this is close to things that the private sector are actually quite good at. It is a domain where doing a certain level of out-of-pocket financing is not something which is a huge barrier. I mean, people are used to have a known intervention, which is maybe a limited intervention in contraception and so on. And so what I think we need to do is on one track, work on getting this into core financing, but we all know that it's not going to be easy, and look for certain types of private financing, linking it then to, I mean, private financing is interested to get in contact with a young population, is interested to be involved in the feminist cause. And the reason why they're interested is because this is such a huge pool of talent. And it would be such a waste of talent, and no one can permit himself or herself to be wasting so much talent that we have across the world. But really, I mean, that this question you asked me, it's not an easy one in tight fiscal times. But we've always been creative, and we always have found ways to put this high on the agenda. Despite anything you see in the world debate, there is still a very large part of the population who cares about gender rights, who care about access to SRHR. And it is one of the easiest ways to involve people. When I was Minister of Development, very often when I was talking in a room, I would say to people, well, you know, what would your life be today if you had not access to contraception at the moment you were 15 or 16 years old? Everyone understands that, well, your life is very different if you don't have access to contraception, if you don't have access to SRHR rights. So it's something which is very easy to convince the public of why it is important to continue investing in it.
Amazing. I like that idea, like around, you know, like there is also another private financing, but I think those kind of ideas, it's not new. It has been happening and has been talked since, I think, the Monterrey discussion, Addis Ababa, up until now in Sevilla. So another question, I know you also have very tight time, but maybe probably it's going to be the last question. So I hope you can answer
Yeah, I'll
this.
take a last one.
You'll take the last one. Cool. So, I mean, I still question a lot, like, you know, this discussion has been happening long time ago, even maybe some of us wasn't even born before, like young people that attending today, since like Monterrey and also Addis Ababa. But like, there is always one reason that we keep hearing that, you know, from donors, from the government, to avoid the core and flexible funding. They keep talking that this is the risk to give the funding for the young people, for the SRHR. And from your own perspective, how can this government and also probably multilaterals reframe their risk appetite, because it seems like it's not even like they're afraid. Maybe it's just like the appetite, not okay, this is too much, funding, the flexible funding is risk. So in order to see the youth and feminist organizing not only as a liabilities, but as a long-term investment in social transformation. Because talking about Xari is talking about like economic justice. But apart from that, sometimes when we talk about economic justice, they will also try to avoid, oh no, actually Xari is not part of that. So how to actually also reframe this as, you've been in politics so long, then I know you've have a lot of also experience in doing this, and then Belgium is one of the leading core for this as well.
Well, I think the main risk is not funding it at all, and that's really how we had to put it. I mean, if you don't fund projects with youth, if you don't fund SRHR, contraception, and so on, I mean, the impact of that is a huge impact. And I mean, if there is one case where we see that it actually works and you get positive results, it's in this it's in this domain. So that, let's use that as a basis. And the second element is, what type of financing do you give? I mean, I understand the need for accountability, the need for showing that it has an impact. But this is by definition a domain where it is actually quite hard to come with large institutions that kind of steamroll general approaches applicable throughout the whole country. This is by definition something where you need local teams and local expertise and a bit of a local flavor as well. I mean, if you want to talk to young people, I tend to think that I'm still able to do so. But actually, people who are half my age, they're much better at doing it. And that's just a reality. And you need to accept that. And so, but today, I mean, there's many technological ways to do that. There's so many technological ways how you can make sure that that flexible financing is being accounted for, is being controlled, and is being tracked on the impact. And tracking the impact of investment in youth and investment in contraception is actually one of the easier things to do. So instead of letting it being used as an excuse, I think we need to come up and to say, no, okay, we understand your concerns, but this is the answers that we have, and the answers are actually technologically feasible. And please trust us, I mean, using technology in general, the young population is better at it than an older generation is.
I really like the statement that actually funding and financing it's not the problem. It's never been the problem. I think the problem is like the mindset itself, and also not the trust that they would like to put in young people. Because like as you mentioned, it's super easy actually to give the funding and financing to issues like around contraception or SRHR, because it's something that you can actually track, and there is always a return of investment from that part. So it has been great discussion, Alexander the Croo. It's amazing. I know you have to run now to the other.
I have to run, but really, it was a joy to be here, and it's a topic I will always love to be involved in, and really would like to thank all of you, Sonali, Dina, and the rest of the team. You're doing an amazing job. So even if it is only online this time, I'm sure we'll meet again at some point, and would love to continue working again. Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you so much, everyone. Thank you so much also, Mr. Alexander. Give round of applause for Alexander the Croo. We are deeply grateful for your
Thank you.
But you can also leave now and then. Everybody, if you have other questions that can be addressed as well to Alexander the Croo. This is not the end of the discussion, by the way. I just want to tell that if you have questions, you are free to always put it on the chat. Then we can also address that to Alexander the Croo after this. Probably we can also ask him to answer that on Instagram, if it's possible. Or like also another ways, as like he mentioned, that technological ways is always there, and then young people always know the way. So now it has been great discussion with Alexander. I hope you get a lot of insights as well. But now it's not the end. I would like to move on now to turn to another powerful story. There is amazing women also join us today. Priscilla Efe, the founder and executive director of Xari Africa, that working on digital rights, sexual reproductive health and rights, and youth inclusion in Nigeria. So Efe, if you are here, the floor is yours. Please enlighten us. Tell us about your concern. Tell us about your story as a youth-led organization, the leader that has to find a way to get the flexible funding for the youth organization. The floor is yours.
Happy to. Thank you, Dina. Thanks, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, whatever time you are listening to this. My name is Ife Johnson, and thank you so much for having me. It's always such a privilege to bring youth voices and lived realities into conversations like this. So thank you to Youth Hub and all the organizers for prioritizing youth and feminist leadership. So I've been asked to share a personal experience. So I really want to just bring it home by sharing a personal story and then sort of like segue into my call to action. So the personal story I want to share is a lived experience, really. I wanted to share. There are so many of them, but I chose this one because it's the most recent. And this happened in December last year, where we were awarded a few €1,000 grants to expand a fellowship that my organization does that was supposed to train young advocates to deliver SRHR education in remote communities. But as I speak with you right now, it's been 6 months and we still have not received the disbursement, even though it was publicly announced, right? And not just that, there has been minimal communication, unclear explanation, and just absolute silence. And the delay has disrupted our entire project cycle for the year, and it even almost left us in debt, right? What is worse is that it also caused emotional strain on the team. I mean, everybody was ready to execute and they just had to sit down helplessly, you know, hearing promises of disbursements next week and next month until we passed the 6 months mark. And the sad thing is that this is supposed to be coming from one of the biggest youth organizations, like they brand themselves as a youth organization, and yet they've just left us hanging, you know, left us in distress without accountability. And I personally had to write and file a formal complaint because there was literally no whistleblowing policy. There was no way we could call them out. So I had to write and file a formal complaint email because I just could not stand the disrespect and injustice being done to young people. And that was when we finally got clear communication. And this is just one of many examples, right? So in my work with Xari Africa, working on the ground, I've witnessed time and again the painful consequences of underfunding youth-led organizations. Most times we receive one-off or short-term grants with no guarantees for renewal. And that means that we are stuck in the cycle of constantly having to prove ourselves, prove our worth, even after we've shown like the impact of our work. And I know that it's the same for many other youth-led organizations. And what this does is that it keeps us in survival mode because we're unable to scale, we're unable to hire full-time staff, we're unable to invest in our infrastructure. We're not even able to plan beyond just a few months each year. So our impact becomes fragile, and no matter how strong our commitment or our passion is, we really cannot do much. So I think a conversation that we really do need to have more is the fact that underfunding is not just a funding issue, it's actually a justice issue. And I'll explain that. In Kaduna, Nigeria, where I have worked, I meet girls who use rags, who use they use rags, they use newspapers, they use foams from their own mattresses to go to school because they cannot afford sanitary care products, right? I've met girls who have dropped out of schools due to unintended pregnancies. I've met girls who I've heard of girls who have died from unsafe abortion. So it's easy to sit on panels like this and speak about youth-led funding from a theoretical place. But for those of us who are actually working in the field, it's not always theory, right? It's about survival. It's about ensuring that we leave no girl and no young person behind. And right now, I can boldly say that the global financing system is actually leaving girls behind, right? Because these are not just abstract statistics. These are real lives being lost. These are real lives being disrupted because youth-led organizations, it is we who are closest to the realities on ground, and we're not being adequately resourced to respond to these issues. So it's more than just paperwork. I would say that it's a human rights failure, and we must treat it as seriously as a human rights failure. And on the flip side, I can actually say that I've experienced both sides of the coin, and I want to talk a bit about how flexible funds actually do make a difference, because as I get to collaborate with other young change makers, I hope I'm not speaking too fast. I tend to do that sometimes. I hope I'm not speaking too fast, please. Oh, okay. So as I collaborate with young change makers across Africa, one thing that we've come to realize is that flexibility actually does make all the difference. Personally, we've had a partnership where we had very minimal restrictions because the donors trusted us basically, and they allowed us to reach adolescent girls in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Ghana, 3 countries in such a short time, because they gave us the space to do what we know how to do best, right? So the impact that we made was possible because we're not being bound by unrealistic reporting or rigid frameworks that do not exactly reflect our context. So that's the kind of agility I would say that grassroots organizations need. In my experience, flexible funding creates dignity. It says we trust you as young people, we believe in your leadership, we know that you are capable. And it's that kind of trust that builds ownership, that allows us to move with speed and to be able to create the impact that we need to create. So I would say that it goes beyond just support. It has to be partnership. It has to be partnership with young people. That's what we need. Anything else just becomes very performative. So yeah, flexible funding does work, and we need trust-based philanthropy that sees young people as beneficiaries, and not just as beneficiaries, but as co-creators of change. So finally, I think I'll just share what I think needs to change and my demands for FfD4. Okay, so what needs to change? I would say everything about how youth-led organizations are currently resourced definitely needs to change. I'm calling on FfD4, youth, world leaders, everyone involved, ecosystem partners and all, to confront the structural bias, because that's one of the most important things. The structural bias in global development finance. Youth-led organizations like mine are constantly treated, and I know you mentioned that, Dina, you said we're being treated as a risk, which is so true. Youth-led organizations are constantly treated as a risk, meanwhile international organizations are seen as the safe bet. But we're the ones on ground, we're the ones doing the actual work, we're responding in real time. So we need more equitable and accessible application processes that do not automatically disqualify us just because we're youth-led, just because we're small, just because we are locally registered. And very important, another thing to bring to light is two-way accountability. This hits so close to home, and I just want to talk about it. I would say that accountability should not only be demanded from youth and youth-led organizations. If you expect youth to deliver on time, then donors, please disburse on time as well. If a fund is announced in January, it should not take 6 months to be disbursed. Someone should be held accountable. It should go both ways, right? Because the current culture of silence and just trying to keep things all hush hush is really harming us and harming the people that we serve. So I would say that there should be transparency and there should be more accountability on both ends. Yeah. So basically that's what I have to say. Yeah. Do I have more
You left me
time?
speechless. Honestly, Eve, like whatever you are mentioning, it's it is a round of applause. But it's really powerful intervention actually. Like you mentioned that the like girls, especially girls, are literally sidelined and left behind for this discussion around financing for development. I just want to give the information to people that attending today. Like I'm here at Sevilla, and then like I've experienced myself as a young person that it's so hard just to enter the venue itself. If you do not have accreditation, you cannot go there. And then also there is a fact that the financing our future, the FfD4 youth toolkit, the published just days ago, it calls out that young people remain ignored, which is it's true, because within the global financing processes, emphasizing that they are crucial stakeholders, yet frequently they just excluded from the negotiations table. There is no single roundtable that is actually inviting young people or level on young people. The civil society organization couldn't even enter the roundtable because they don't have the pass and accreditation, leave alone like speaking. It's like something that like in our dream. But also, you know, in the toolkit also reports that the youth engagement in FfD4 venue comes only through side event and civil society forum and select ministerial roundtables, but they literally don't have the official roles in the drafting or decision making bodies. I've been engaging with the children CYMG group, and then like we actually draft our call to action, but then like to ensure that this call to action being adopted or like accepted, let alone adopted by these decision making leaders, it's something that we have to also check. And then like whenever we question this, they said come to New York because we will see there is like General Assembly document happening there. How we come to New York if there are a lot of young people has been experiencing visa injustice just to go to Sevilla? So that's something that we've been mentioning about, that like this is happening, this is real. And then
Yes, and we can't keep saying, throwing around catchphrases like "leave no one behind," just because it's a nice thing to say. It sounds nice to say. Meanwhile, in reality, young people, young women and girls are being left behind. We're saying these things because we work on the ground, but every people who have the privilege of just being on big stages, you know, world leaders and all of that, are able to just echo these words without really knowing the meaning of these words. Because you can't just stand on a stage and say, "Oh, we're working to ensure that we want to leave no one behind." Meanwhile, young people are not being engaged. I mean, just negotiations alone are so difficult to do with young people, not to talk of how do they expect us to actually make the change that we want to see. We need to get into these rooms. There needs to be it needs to be easier for us to get into these rooms, whether virtually, whether physically. Young people need to also be, as much as we're calling on world leaders to listen to us, to, you know, take us seriously, I think there needs to be avenues created for young people to take up leadership positions as well. We need that representation. Young people, young women, we definitely need more representation. We need more voices speaking for us. We need more voices who understand what we're going through. We need more voices who bring this lived experience into the rooms that matter.
No, that's totally true. I agree with that. Like, they are not equipping us to be ready and prepared to give such like interventions to this like so thematic and like very hard discussion, because like at the end of the day, how many people already learn about financing for development where they were like studying? I don't think so. So it's like we're expected to be like coming here as a young people. You are the future generation. You have to give such like amazing input, but then we are not equipped to be ready. So we are not possible by that. Anyway, Eve, it's amazing, but I want to let you stay here because I would like to invite now and welcome another powerhouse feminist movement building, Esther Nyawira, the programs coordinator at Femnet. Esther brings decades of collective organizing experience, working across Africa to shift power, amplify feminist leadership, and challenge extractive funding system. So, Esther, we are so grateful to have your voice in this conversation. We are so grateful to co-organize this session with you. And then we are very thankful actually, because again, like I just want to mention that Femnet has been in this field for so long, and then Femnet has like the access, and they are opening up the access for Yield Hub as well to work together and organize this event. Because if it's not because of Femnet, we are not possible to actually conduct this side event, because like they've been in the field and then they already got like the accreditation. That's why UNDESA let us do this. But without that, maybe this discussion today is not possible and not happening. It's amazing. Give a round of applause for Femnet and Esther. And then we're gonna have a discussion now together with Efe as well. So yeah, Esther.
Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you so much, Dina. We are happy to do this with you, and we dream, and we would want a world where you don't have to go through Femnet, you know, because we have ECOSOC accreditation in order for you to have a side event or a parallel event or whatever it is. We would want you as Yield Hub and many other Yield Hubs to be able to organize, to convene, you know, in their own right, because you have the power to do that. I think building onto what everybody has said, I want to add on to some of the things that other speakers have talked about. When we were starting, Sonali talked about courage and trust. And I feel like young people, youth-led and feminist-led organizations are very courageous. They do their work with or without funding. With everything that is happening in Kenya, where I come from, young people have been coming together to fundraise and to support activists who are in the front line during the protests. Within a few minutes, you know, people are able to raise millions of money to support medical bills and all that. And so that what that means, it's challenging the fact that, you know, that people have to wait for money from somewhere, from a donor and all that. So it happens. And so for me, when the word courage came out, I quickly thought that young people are courageous, but I think that the people who have the money are very scared of financing the power that young people have. Because like Sonali said, that imagine if young people are already doing amazing work without funding, what can happen if they got resourced? And so I think for me, power holders who are gatekeeping, they need to learn to trust people and to let us as young people take the lead. So they are the ones now who need the courage to trust. And the way when I was thinking about this session, I kept thinking that there are layers and layers of access that people need. I feel like there are big donors, for instance, okay, let me not mention names for now, but there are big donors who go through INGOs, or they will go through for instance, an organization like us, because for them, they have to account. They need to report, this is how money has flowed. And that's, you know, accountability is key. But also, like FS said, it needs to be two-way. So if you have committed to give money to young people, also us as young people, we should be able to ask you, and you should respond and tell us this is how much money you have given to youths if you made that commitment. And so those ones also need to change their systems, make them flexible and all that. I feel like everyone at every step of in their level, there is a level of flexibility that they need. I will give an example of what as Femnet we have done. We have been in consortiums where we are working with young people. Previously, I was leading our work with girls and young women, adolescent girls who are between 14 and 24 years. And that age is different. It is different from the 25 to 30, 30 to 35. And when we had flexible funding, we also had an adaptive programming in our work. And I have seen how successful it has been, because that flexibility also came from the donor who had given us that money. It also came from the institution, the leadership within the organization. And they had to remain open, because when we are working with them, with young people, their things are different. If you want girls and young women to be in policy spaces, if you need them to travel, they need documentation. Where do you think they're going to get those documentation? You can't tell them to pay for themselves. They don't work. And even if they work, their priority is to put food on the table or pay school fees, whatever it is. And so I feel like some of the best things that worked, and I think they can be replicated in other programs. I think institutions or organizations, if you're working with young people, can you let the programs that are being, or the work that is being done by young people, to be led by young people? Because it looks ridiculous to have other people, you know, coming to tell, to work with young people. It doesn't look nice. You are preaching something that is totally different. Number two, there was a time we were developing a teenage girls strategy, engagement strategy, and they told us All the time we have been told since we were born, we are always told to listen. Listen when you're in class, listen when you're everywhere, listen at home, you're told to listen, you speak last. But when we are in this space, we also want you to listen because we have a lot. In fact, they told us, you also need to tell our parents to listen, talk to them. Because sometimes we have ideas, or when we have ideas, they don't want to listen to us. So listen, deep listening. Listen, ask them questions because they already have the answers, and then act on what they're saying, and that's what we have been trying to do all the time. For us, when we started that program that I was talking about, we were implementing in 7 countries. We also made sure that all the programs, each country had a young woman below 35 years who was leading, who was the country coordinator. Now that looked impossible at the designing stage, but it was actually achievable. There were challenges because older people beyond 35 years, had never reported or had never been accountable to a younger person. So we had issues, but it worked, and it proved that it works. So those are, in short, what I'm saying is that young people are able to lead. They are able to lead programs. They are able to lead reporting and do it very efficiently. No one was not born without power. I think that it's only that the systems have been put that are in place are against young people. They are against the power that power is taken away. So we cannot we will not be able to finance youth-led movements, our futures, if currently, because the system is broken, the system is against us, and so it needs to be reformed. The current architecture, financial architecture, is not working, and if it continues, we will continue asking youth and young and feminists to do a lot, but they are doing a lot with nothing, and so that needs to change. I think another thing that I would want to add is that all the speakers who have been there before have talked about it. There is a lot of consultations, but people do it, just to tick the box. They want young people when it is convenient for them. They want young women when it is convenient. Oh, we have an opening session. Who is here? We have a person with disability. We have an indigenous person. We need a young person right now. And that is not important. That is not enough. I think what happened is that initially maybe the people who were there before, that's what they were calling for. And then when we achieved that, we thought that we have arrived. No. It's a journey. Once you do something, you have achieved it, you continue. You have to ask yourself, so what next? What needs to happen? And so we know that young engagement and involvement of youth is strategic. So it needs to be funded because it is strategic, because it will help us to achieve the impact that we need. We have seen that the leadership of young people has been proven. Now we're not talking about young people have potential. No, they already have the leadership skills. And in any case, nobody ever has all the skills that they need, because every day is a new day and there's something to learn. So nobody has it all figured out. And so I would say that leadership is no longer a potential, it is proven. And so when we talk about funding and financing all the work that young people are doing, we need to change the mindset that we have. Because money is there, it's just that it is going to the wrong hands or the wrong resources, because probably we feel like, or those who are in power feel like when they engage young people, they will not bring profit, and it is wrong. Because what will happen is that if we continue with the same trend, we will get into trouble. It's like not feeding your child, and later on, they will get malnourished, and they will come back if they will either pass away or whatever will happen. when young people are not, funded, what do you think is going to happen to the world? That's why we have criminal gangs and all that, because they feel like you don't care about us. Why would we also care? So yeah, we are refusing to, or people are refusing to fund or to invest in the most strategic areas of life, which is a sad reality. Yeah, I think I will stop at that and then maybe continue later.
I have a lot of questions to you actually, because like everything that you have been mentioning is true, and it's totally true, and it's actually currently happening. We are experiencing it. We are like witnessing it. So like one of like our topic today is like literally how to shift our mind, and then thinking about like moving from tokenism to the true investment. You've been mentioning that the system is broken, the trust is broken, the architects nowadays is not in the right pathway. So if you could like probably tell us as well, because like we know that Femnet has been working in this issue for so long time. If you could share like examples of like the mechanism or funders, like the success story that showing as well, like, hey, actually involving young people, like from just being ticking the DI box and then like for the report, but ensuring that it's meaningful and then like it's for long-term investment. So at the end of the day, we are not only carrying the same statement again from one outcome official documents from decades to decades to decades until probably, I don't know, in the next 20 years, and then the demand is still the same. Because I've been reading the Monterrey document, the consensus, Addis Ababa one, up until the Sevilla Compromiso. It's like whatever has been mentioning there is actually kind of like a repetition. So I was like, what's the missing point here? Like, you know already like the problem since 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but why it keeps repetitive, you know? So what do you think, like as a person on the ground that has been working for these issues, like how literally to transform that? Like, you know, this is like tokenistic. We know that it has been happening since decades.
Yeah.
How literally to now this is the time, before like it's literally repetition again for like the bad things happening. So
yeah, that's a hard one. I think
I come here for the hard
the
question.
action is the one that is difficult, because people are in a comfort zone, and the only thing, and there are few who have set the rules, yet the rules that they set, or the policies that they set, or the commitments that they make, they affect millions of people. And so I know that that will not be easy to happen, but it is possible. Only that I am not sure that it will happen with these people in the current structure. But like I had mentioned before, everyone has a part to play. And if everybody, for instance, if the UN institutions were very objective, it would make a difference, because they would ensure that, for instance, young people have access. They would make sure, for instance, that even CSOs have access. Right now, you can see the emails that are coming every morning to remind us of the security protocols. Don't wear anything that has messages. You don't have access, don't move around, and all that. And I'm wondering, are you for us or against us? You know, I feel like it's not objective. I feel like it's not even, I feel it is clear, you know, there is no objectivity that all participants should have access, because are we not fighting for the same thing? Are we not on the same page? Don't we want the best for us all in the world? But it feels like there's a lot of push and pull. And for me, I feel that there should be partnership and collaboration in the work that we do, because we want development. We want finance for development. We don't want finances for profits. We want people first. We want profits, and we want the planet to also be well. So I think institutions right now are subjective, and they need to be objective, starting with the UN, because that is where we can run to. They're the ones who are given the responsibility to ensure that we participate, that we engage, that our voices are heard, that they are seen. But it seems right now that is not happening. So that objectivity needs to happen.
That's true. The objectivity, that part is like has to be taken into account and has to be happening.
Yeah.
Means like it both ways, right? Like we have to hold each other's accountable both ways.
Yeah.
We have to secure that. But again, Esther, another question. Like I know you've been also working in the national level as well for this, so you know that at the end of the day, after whatever happening today until like 3rd July, the outcomes document has to be brought to the
Yeah.
level. There is
Yeah.
a question from the chat that I was like reading. You know, SRHR is about economic justice as well, but it's always
Yeah.
sidelined. At the end of the day, sometimes like the national official never even put that in the national budget because they don't know the link that actually SRHR relate to economic justice. They just sort of forget, suddenly have the amnesia.
Yeah.
You know, oh, really? It's like actually related, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
oh, actually, because like there are tons of young people in here. I know they've been working in the regional, national, international level, but for people that working in the grassroots, if you could, let's give like a sort of like suggestion and advice how we can keep carrying it, like you moving the barricade and then ensure that, hey, hello, you've been saying yes in Seville, but why this is not happening in national level? Because I know Kenyan youth are like amazing. They are doing amazing work currently. So as a Kenyan woman, give us the advice for that.
I think number one, there's need for information, access to information on, like you had mentioned before that nobody learned about FFD in high school, in school. Even me, I think I got to know about it not long ago. It must have been in 2025 or late 2024. And I keep asking myself whether people really know, or whether majority of the world knows how decisions are affected about them. I have been reflecting a lot about, for instance, when I was in school, whether I knew that that it's a right for me to have food or school fees, or whether that was the responsibility of my parents. Because if my parents also were paying taxes, why couldn't I get access to, to school, school fees, maybe funded by the government, or hospital medication and all that? And so I feel that maybe this is the work of the civil society, and together, maybe also with the government and other stakeholders. I think it is important to know that FFD happened. Then these were the issues that were discussed, and every decision that was made, this is how it affects them. I will give you an example. Last year, when we were had the finance bill in Kenya, everybody came and did their part. There were people who are translating the document in small bits, because also these documents are huge, and the language is also, you need a dictionary near you. But people, yeah, so it needs to be broken down in a language that can be understood, and I think that's now the work that needs to happen at the national level, so that different segments can be broken down into a language that people will understand. If it is, for instance, in our country, it needs to be in Swahili. People need to so that people can get it. So that means that even the media has to be involved. But so far, I have not seen, I think media from our region. And that means that us who are here, for instance, and Femnet, which is the regional body, and together with other partners that I have seen, we have to come together and go back, not put a full stop, but continue with the conversation, so that we can let the stakeholders that we are representing here know what happened, what was discussed, how does it affect them. So it's a lot of work which has to happen, and I think like translation of those documents into local languages, it can be through media, digital, whether online or the other print, that can help people to get it. For us right now, we are always following even the global conversations that are happening. We want to know where our president is, what he is doing, what he's talking about, all that. So we are always watching, very keen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that because, one of the constraint that's happening, again, I'm telling you, like the language and knowledge is something like luxurious. Like for many people, not being able to participate meaningfully in the event itself or reading the document pre-hand and then
Yeah.
afterwards understand these technical languages, which is it's very hard. I tried like months ago to read like the documents, like I'm keep mentioning the Monterrey one, the Addis Ababa, the Summit of the Future one. It's like all interconnected until like even the Sevilla Compromiso. It's like 38 pages. 38. I was trying to break down into like 2 minutes video because I'm also trying together with you'll have to create this kind of content about FFD and make sure that young people understand that actually the discussion happening without them. 38
I
pages.
think it is intentional. The issue of making the language that is being used and how big the documents are, I think it is intentional, because when you see 38 pages, my friend, you will probably shut down, you know, the moment you see it. But I think this is what I usually often think. Sometimes life seems so complicated because there is so much investment that has gone into making those processes and structures so complicated. The opposite is also true. If you invest in making things simple and clear, accessible, it is gonna happen. So it is not by mistake, it's by design.
I like it. It's by design. It has been designed since beginning. They don't want to involve young people, so let's just make it like super dull, super boring with all those 40 pages. So yeah, I agree. And then like suddenly there is like one day, it was yesterday happening that actually, hey, could you give please input towards this document within 1 hour? How could you let us do that? Like we don't even understand some technical questions, some technical words, and then they want us to be the representative of the 1.8 billion people, young people, and then adolescents in this world. So that doesn't create some justice as well.
Yeah.
So Efe, I'm Esther, and then like I would like to invite Efe as well to come back again to this panel. Thank you so much, Esther. Like, I mean, everything that you've been mentioning, all the fact, and then like you also mentioned about it, it takes two to tango. Like at the end of the day, holding each other's accountable, and also the accountability also has to flow two ways, not only from grantees to donor or not from like government to the young people, but it has to be both ways because at the end, we are not only working alone. It's not only about ticking the DEI box. It's not only for like photo op because like often happen during the event like this. Come here, young people, let's take a picture and then put that in the report. Look, there are hundreds of young people joining this event. It means it's inclusive and then like it's youth friendly. So that's totally wrong. So it's amazing, like, and I know that a couple of questions already like addressed as well, even before we ask it to you, because you already mentioned that you already answered and addressed the question, Esther. So I would like to invite now Efe as well in here. So people that come, participant that come today, we would like to let you know that actually since 3 weeks, a month before the event, we already create like the survey and we spread out the survey for, you know, just talk about and think about like the youth call to action for financing development. We ask a lot of questions coming like how well you know about the financing for development, about the funding, access to funding itself. So the survey itself, actually the response directly shape a joint call to actions that will be presented by our amazing Efe today. And then basically this is also co-organized again with YieldHub and Femnet with also support from CYMG Group. The title is Financing Youth and Feminist Futures, again, from tokenism to investment. This actually to amplify the youth demands to donors, governments, and institutions. There are a couple of facts that Efe will also mention. And I think my colleagues in here, Alex or also Mila, will share the link to the call to action where you can access that. And please let us know if you would like to endorse this call to action, because we are trying with our power here, not only Yield Hub, but also Femnet and also CYMG Group that attends Sevilla forum that can also deliver this statement. Actually, in fact, this statement has been sent by written to the event today earlier at 8:30 a.m. during the side event with the Global Affairs Canada to mention and state what's actually the demand of the young people. So if you are willing, please leave the comment in the chat what's your organization, what's your name, if you would like to put also in the endorsement page of this call to action. Because at the end, if we work together about this, showing the power of young people, that will be even better. So Efe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dina, and thanks everyone for being here and for staying this long. So to close out, I would share a bit of the call to action, the global call to action. I'm hoping that everyone can go back and read the document in full and also endorse it, like Dina has said. So young people around the world are saying that we do not just need a seat at the table, we need actual resources to make the change that our communities need. Youth-led and feminist organizations worldwide are clear. The current funding landscape is failing us with rigid, short-term, and inaccessible financing that excludes those closest to the challenges, which also means those closest to the solutions. We're saying that we need bold, youth-focused overhaul of development financing. And you've heard us talk about the challenges of what's holding youth back. Funding that fails youth, gatekeeping through complexity, a crisis of trust, power without partnership, and funding that does not reach youth. This is our demand. This is what youth want. We're saying that fund the work, not just the project. Youth-led change needs flexible, sustainable, and long-term support that allows them to adapt, grow, and build for the future, not just survive grant cycles. We're saying create a fund built with and for youth. We want a global financing mechanism shaped by youth and feminist voices, particularly from the global south, that centers justice and accessibility. We're saying commit to real investment. At least 20% of development funding should go directly to youth-led initiatives. No more trickle-down funding. Youth work needs direct and intentional financing. We are also saying to treat youth as partners, not just participants. Youth must be equal players in funding decisions, not consulted as a formality, but invited to co-lead how funding systems are shaped and governed. And lastly, we're saying reach the margins, not just the mainstream. Funding must prioritize those excluded from formal systems, such as marginalized groups and rural collectives, and support our local, cultural, and creative approaches.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Efe. And then people, I really like love this discussion today, and that's like literally what Efe mentioned about the call to action. Please endorse if it's possible for you all as well for this, and let us know in the chat. But also we would like to give information as well that there is another statement, like a feminist statement on the outcome documents of the Seville Compromise, led by Young Feminist Caucus, Yield Hub, and also Femnet already like endorsed this during the FfD4. And there is also FfD Feminist Forum Political Declaration, led by groups like Femnet and also Women's Major Group. I will share the declaration in here. If you also want to endorse, you can do also that. This is like more like in the realm of Feminist Forum Political Declaration. The one that Efe just mentioned, it's purely based on the survey that we already collected in the past 1 month. So this is literally the voice from the young people all over Europe, Latin American, Caribbean, Asia, Pacific, and then also Africa. So please let us know if you are willing to also endorse on that, so that we can also move forward and then like amplify your own voices, including your endorsement and your name as well, and showing these global leaders that we are here, not to be only seen, but we would like to take the space, and then we have the power to do that. Thank you so much, everyone. But before we end the discussion, because we are aware of the timing, I think Alex will help with, there is like a poll that Alex will lead. Yeah, you can talk about that, Alex, before I'm gonna give the closing statement later.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Dina, and thank you, Efe, Esther, also Alexander, everyone who spoke today. It's really been amazing discussions. So we've launched this poll, which is based on all the discussions we've had today and obviously your own lived experiences. what is the #1 change you think donors must make to truly support youth and feminist movements? So we're asking you to just pick one, the one that you think is the most important out of these 5 options. So is it provide long-term core unrestricted funding, trust young and feminist leaders as decision makers, simplify grant applications and reporting, fund intersectional, community-rooted solutions, or shift accountability to include donor behavior? Please let your voices be heard. And yeah, looks like trusting young and feminist leaders as decision makers seems to be the most popular so far, but we'll see what everyone says in a moment.
You know, it's hard, but just like pick one, like the top one. We know everything is needed. It's not like, but like, yeah, it's just like a little bit like of practice and then game from us, like we want to see. Because we saw there are a couple of donors also attending the session today. We want them to also listen and then see. This is like the demand from the young people. And then we will definitely send the call to actions to also the donor connection and network that we have. So they will also know and understand the demand from the young people regarding financing for development. How many people already answer, Alex?
We've had just around just 29 people have answered. So I'd say I'll give you 10 more seconds for the last people to have their voices heard, and then I will end the poll. Okay, that's it. So I will share the results now. You can see the top 2 answers are, of course, trust young and feminist leaders as decision makers, and also in a close second is provide long-term core unrestricted funding. So, I mean, all of these 5 are extremely important, but these 2, I think we can definitely see why you would have voted that. So thank you very much, everyone who voted there, and I'll hand you now back over to Dina.
Thank you, Alex. So trust young and feminist leaders as decision makers. And probably the second one is the provide long-term core unrestricted funding. That's really important. The first step, maybe the key takeaways for people that attending today's session. Remember, that's the demand from the young people as well. And then we need to work on that. This is the time not only to listen for donor, government, and an official. Literally, this is the time for work. So as we close, I want to leave people with this. You know, the funding, like Alexander already mentioned before, funding is not the problem. At the end of the day, the problem is the political will, the priorities, and the power. Because at the end, money is there. It has always been there, but it's still being directed to the comfortable, not the courageous, just like what Esther mentioned. And until youth and feminist movements are trusted with unrestricted long-term resources, we are not funding the future. We are just managing the status quo. We are just doing everything for formative. So my boldest hope and our boldest hope, I would like to say, is that FfD4, the financing development, is moving and shifting from symbolic gesture to long-term investments so that in the people reimagining justice from the ground up. So please stay connected with the Yield Hub and also Femnet socials. The revolution is about funded. It's not postponed. Let's make it funded. And thank you, everybody, and solidarity as always. If you would like to stay connected with us, please follow our social media, Yield Hub and also Femnet and MGCY, and let us know if you would like to also endorse our own call to actions so that we hope we can amplify your voice beyond FfD4, also during the FfD4. Thank you very much for your time, for this amazing conversation, the enlightening part. I hope you enjoy the session. And if there is another questions, always keep in touch with us at info@yieldhub.global. Thank you very much. My name is Dina, the Program Associate of the Yield Hub, signing off. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.